I was reflecting on who were the great teachers of my life, and there have been so many. But the thing that I go to straight away when I think about teachers is the incredible learning that I've had from the privilege of working with people in the developing world, in low and middle income countries, and particularly in working with kids. In our work at Adara, we work with lots of kids, thousands, tens of thousands of kids, but there's one group of kids that have taught me so much, and they're known inside Adara as the Adara kids. There are 136 of them, and they came into our life now nearly 15 years ago when we found them on their way into the child trafficking trade, into the begging trade, the sex trade, a trade that comes from poverty and unfortunately is endemic around our world. The littlest of the Adara kids, when they came into our life, became part of our family, were three, and there were three-year-olds. They have families of origin that they are connected to and are incredibly important, but they're also part of our family, the Adara family. From working with the Adara kids has informed all the work we've done in child protection with thousands, tens of thousands of kids and in the 15 years since. So if I take myself to the three littlies, you're not supposed to have favourites in this work, but it's really hard not to, particularly when you fall in love with little three-year-olds. And I wanted just to talk about three of them that really taught me a lot. So the first one's a little girl called Paladin. She was 3 when she came into our life. She comes from a place that's 25 days walk from a road, and she came out of a very tough situation of poverty. And when she was really little, she used to sleepwalk at night. We had 10 Adara homes. We set up not institutional care, but residential care for these kids as we sought their families and figured out how best to provide support to them. And little Paladin used to sleepwalk, and she would sleepwalk to the window as a little toddler, and she would stand at the window and she would cry in her sleep, Ima, Ima, crying for her mother. And it used to break my heart that this little wee one was in that terrible situation and so longing for home and for the love that the rest of us often take for granted. She's just passed the International Baccalaureate. She speaks 4 languages. She is a shining superstar of a young woman. And Paladin has taught me in my life, being connected to her, has taught me that girls truly can do anything when they're loved and they're given a chance. The second really little one that has a big place in my heart is a cool kid called Marichiman. And I remember when we first met Marichiman, before we were able to take custody of these kids, and the situation they were in was pretty horrific. And I remember sitting out on the step one day and watching Marichiman, and he found a piece of old newspaper and some tape, and he'd taped it all together and turned it into a soccer ball. And I remember this kid with no shoes on in this terrible situation, this tiny wee kid, and he was booting this soccer ball around with complete abandon. And I realized as I was looking at him, there's almost always a solution to your problem. If you're a kid in poverty in a terrible situation with a bit of tape and a bit of newspaper, you can make a soccer ball, and you can be amongst the soccer giants of the world in the life that you're living in your head. And time again, I saw that and was taught that by our kids. And the final one, I guess, that I would call out as now he's a young man, Prabanda. And same thing, a terrible situation when he came into our lives. And when he got his first bike, so it was probably 5 or 6 by the time we got him a bike. And I remember watching him. He became famous in Adara for burning around crazily on this bike. And I was watching him one day and I realized he's totally present. He's not living in his past. He's living right now in the joy of flying on that bike. And it was a lesson to me. And these kids have taught me this time and time again, be present, relish what's happening in your life, be grateful. The Adara kids, it's just a tip of the iceberg what those kids have taught us. And so much of the learning around that has moved our child protection work to a whole different level, touched the lives of so many more kids. At the end of 2020, I love Twitter. So I was on Twitter and there was a thing running on Twitter, a conversation running about, sum up 2020 in 5 words. And so I wrote, the young became our teachers. And And when I wrote it, I thought, actually, that's been true for my whole life, particularly in relation to the young who come out of the developing world, places that don't take for granted the things that we do.